Excellent.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So today we will continue our discussion on the judicial branch. Okay. Yesterday we went through the dual court system, your federal courts, your state courts, okay, and then kind of the three levels, which basically have your upper courts, which are appellate courts, and your lower courts, which are trial courts. Okay, where the initial trial is generally heard. And what we're going to call that is jurisdiction. Okay, this can be a little bit confusing, but it's not too bad. Okay, so original jurisdiction means the court that's going to hear the initial case. Okay, first, where it will first be heard. These are called trial courts, and this is kind of an interesting term that kind of helps you analyze this a little. It's called trier of fact. Trier of fact. Okay? So that's what trial courts do, is they try and get to the facts. All right? So what are they looking at? How do we determine original jurisdiction? How do we know where this court case is originally going to be heard, Grace? How do we figure that out? We figure that out through subject matter. What is the situation and who's involved? Okay, so if you're dealing with an ambassador from another country involved in a crime, well, that matters. Okay, or if you're looking at somebody like me, that's just an ordinary person, that matters where the case is going to take place. The subject matter, we talked about this a little bit, yesterday. Robbing a bank, that's a subject matter versus robbing coals. Okay, there's a difference. So that's going to help determine original jurisdiction. As I talked about yesterday, 95% of the cases are going to be state and local courts, okay, starting at the lower court level, okay. Appellate jurisdiction is very easy to understand, okay. It hears cases on appeal. That's pretty easy, okay. Now, this is trier of law versus trier of fact. Is the law being followed? Is the law constitutional? Has due process been given? Due process of the law been given to the defendant? You guys following me on that? Okay? So, these could be intermediate, okay, where you have the right to have your case heard at this level. As I was talking about earlier, in the federal courts, you'll have 24 judges. You'll get a 3-judge panel to try the law, to whether you've got a just case, whether you have had due process. Okay, so there you go. Federal courts only hear about 5% of trials. Okay, and these are subject matters that we were just talking about. That creates original jurisdiction. The subject matter, if it is an interpretation of the Constitution or of a federal law, it's going to be a federal case. Right? So if it's a civil rights case, it could be federal. If it's a free speech case, it could be federal. We're dealing with constitutional issues. Okay? Gun laws can become federal cases. Okay? Or gun offenses, where people challenge the constitutionality of federal laws. Okay? Anything done in U.S. waters is going to be federal. The parties involved. Okay? So U.S. government, any agency is involved. So we talked about the mailmen, the banks, which are members of the Federal Reserve. Okay? That's the parties involved. An ambassador, any representative of a foreign country is involved. It's federal. Okay? If one state is suing another state, and this does happen from time to time. Kansas has sued Nebraska before over water from the Arkansas River, because the Arkansas River comes out of Colorado, goes through Nebraska down into Kansas. Well, Nebraska's stealing all of our water. So you go downtown, a lot of times Arkansas River's really low. Okay? And so we have sued in federal courts to prevent Nebraska from stealing all the water before it gets to us. Okay? When someone from one state is suing someone from another state, it can be federal. Now, it doesn't have to be, but this is one of those cases where it can be. We talked about this before with the 11th Amendment. The 11th Amendment, you can't sue somebody and force them to come to your state. Okay? So generally these cases will take place in the state, but are not federal, but they can be. Okay? So here's your subject matter, your parties that will determine original jurisdiction for federal cases. As you can see, because of that scope, why only 5% of all trial cases are held in federal courts. Right? Okay. All right, so that's pretty good stuff. All right, that's pretty easy. Understanding jurisdiction, not too difficult. Okay. So now we're going to focus a little bit on the Supreme Court. All right. We have 9 justices, and on the test, I want you to know their names. Let's see, without looking, if we can name some of them.
Always talk about one and touch the next.
Scalia died. Sotomayor. Ginsburg. 2 liberals. Thomas. Gorsuch. Roberts. Chief Justice. Kennedy, who might be close to retiring.
Wow. Was that all of them?
Kagan. Breyer. Does that take us to 9?
What's the new one's name?
Gorsuch.
Yeah, that's one.
Yeah, we got it. Yeah, you guys, great. Okay. So, just last names will suffice. Okay. Wait a second. We missed one. What page? And I think I have
right
more.
here. Page 103.
Gorsuch on there? Yeah, Alito. Yeah, Gorsuch is on there. Okay, so the Chief Justice is John Roberts. What page is that? Sorry?
103.
103. If you guys got your book, open that. 103. You see that kind of divided up liberal and conservative there.
Is that always how it's supposed to be? Like, is it required?
No, it's really not. It's just the way it's worked out. Also on there at the top, you have, what is that? These are Chief Justices, the names of all the Chief Justices in the history of the court. Okay? If you look at some of these, was it Rehnquist had the really long one? Rehnquist was Chief Justice for 19 years. We've talked about Earl Warren in history.
Do we have to know if they're a conservative, liberal?
No. That was a long one. Marshall. Yeah. So, I mean, it's a pretty select group. It's a small group of Chief Justices. Now, what's interesting, guys, is that when there's a vacancy in the Chief Justice post, okay, when Rehnquist died, because most of these people stay on the court until they die. They don't like to be replaced. Okay? The president gets to fill that spot of Chief Justice. So when Rehnquist died, he could have used one of the other justices to become Chief Justice, but Bush actually chose Roberts to be the Chief Justice. The new guy got to be the Chief Justice. Okay, so he becomes automatically senior, even though he's just there, just brand new. Okay, sometimes they'll switch a person to the Chief Justice, or the replacement the new guy will be that person. The first woman Justice of the Supreme Court was a woman named Sandra Day O'Connor, and Ronald Reagan appointed her. She did retire. She had some serious back problems, as a lot of these judges do, because their main job is to just kind of sit there and read and write, read and write. I mean, that's what they do. Huh?
I'm just so fat doing that.
I'm sure you can take breaks, and exercise. But anyhow, she had really bad back problems, and so she retired, which is pretty rare. The first, yes.
And you said she was the first Chief Justice?
She was just a jurist. She was
a judge.
Yeah. The first African American was Thurgood Marshall, and he has a kind of famous quote from just about being on the court. As he got closer to the age of death, he said, if I die, just prop me up and keep voting for me. Okay. See, at the time there was a Republican president, and he didn't want to be replaced with a conservative judge. So it's just prop me up and keep voting, okay? Pretend like I'm alive. These justices don't like to leave when the ideological opposite is in the White House. You know what I mean? So Kennedy, who's kind of that moderate, is getting close to retirement, which could tip the balance. Now, sometimes these justices will surprise you. Like Roberts really had a key switch in his vote on Obamacare. Okay, because when Obamacare was sold to the American people, if you'll recall, they said that the individual mandate, if you don't buy health insurance when you're 27, you have to pay a fine. That's the way that's the way Obama sold it to us and Pelosi sold it to us. That it's a fine. Okay, but where in the Constitution does it give the government the power to fine you for not buying something? They don't have that power. So when 26 states challenged this, saying this is unconstitutional, including Kansas was part of that, they changed it. And they said, no, it's not a fine, it's a tax. It's a tax. Okay? And Chief Justice Roberts bought that. Okay? And many people were pretty upset with him about that. Okay? Gorsuch just had a ruling that people were kind of surprised about as well. Sometimes people surprise you, like Earl Warren did definitely for Eisenhower. He was a Republican governor, but became a very liberal justice. Okay, that being said, let's talk about this. How do cases reach the Supreme Court? Look, the Supreme Court has federal original jurisdiction. So any case that is federal, the Supreme Court can take the initial case. Almost never happens. Okay? Especially if it's like trier of facts. That's not generally what the Supreme Court does, is ferret out facts. They ferret out the law and the Constitution. Okay? So it almost never happens. All right? So they usually use appellate jurisdiction through what's called writ of certiorari. Okay? Writ of certiorari. Say that.
Writ of certiorari.
Say it again.
Writ of certiorari.
All right. So, telling a court to send up a case. Okay? It could go straight from the district court to the Supreme Court. It could go to the circuit court to the Supreme Court. Okay? Usually that's what happens. Okay? Usually they let it go through all the levels of appeals until they ask for a writ of certiorari. Okay? Now, when do they meet? You don't need to know this section right here, the calendar for the test, but it's kind of interesting to look at. They kind of, a little bit like the school year, okay? Meets the first Monday in October, goes through the end of June. They're a little off, I guess. Sometimes they'll go into July. From October to May, they hear cases on 2-week cycles. Okay? They'll hear oral arguments from 10 a.m. to 2 or 3 p.m., Monday through Wednesday for 2 weeks. Then take 2 weeks to argue cases. On Thursdays and Fridays are set aside for writing opinions and sometimes arguing cases. So this is kind of how their work schedule works. Okay? Anytime there's an appeal that's sent to the Supreme Court, there's the rule of 4. Okay, so if 4 of them want to hear the case, they'll issue a writ of certiorari. If 4 of them want to hear the case, okay. Now, once they decide to hear the case, lawyers from both sides are going to send them written briefs. Okay, here's our argument. Here's the case. Here's all the facts. Here's everything that's happened. And then so the judges have to read those written briefs. And then they start to formulate an opinion. And then they'll bring in the lawyers to hear oral arguments. Okay? Then they'll sit down, they'll debate it, talk about it as a group of 9. Okay? And then they'll start writing their opinions about how they're going to vote on that case. Okay? So, here's the rule of force. We just kind of go through the process here. About 5,000 cases are sent to the court every year. There's no way they can deal with that.
How many of those are,
Sorry?
how many of those are they,
What percent would it
yeah.
Oh, usually anywhere from 150 to 250. Okay. Now some of these are pretty easy to do, but some of them are very complicated, especially if you're going to change something that's been tradition in this country for a long time. They're going to reinterpret the Constitution, something like that. Okay. If they don't take the case, the lower court standing rules. Their ruling stands. All right, so this is what I was talking about earlier. Written briefs, okay, documents that summarize the constitutional argument, lawyers on both sides. Now, there is something called an amicus brief. All right, so let me go back to Obamacare and the insurance mandate that said that insurance policies had to include contraception. Remember this?
Yep.
Hobby Lobby and that, okay? So, Hobby Lobby brings this lawsuit, and Little Sisters of the Poor bring this lawsuit, right? Saying that we shouldn't have to do that because it's against our religion. That's a First Amendment case, all right? Freedom of religion. So, you might see amicus briefs submitted by the Catholic Church. Okay? They have an outcome, a stake in this outcome. It's going to affect the Catholic Church. So lawyers from, the New York diocese or the Boston diocese or what have you may submit arguments to the court saying, if you guys decide that we have to do this, this is how it's going to negatively affect us. Does that make sense? So oftentimes, this is an important thing. So you can see, sometimes the government itself will submit amicus briefs saying this is the impact it's going to have on the government if you decide this. Okay? Groups like the NAACP, the ACLU, and the church are often part of these amicus briefs. Okay? And they can have an impact on the court because it does explain to the court, hey, this is going to have consequences. Okay? So, now remember, this is trier of, not fact, but trier of law. So they're not looking at the facts of the case, okay, but the constitutional issues involved. The trial part, the trier of fact has already long been done. So if you're looking at appeals for things like death penalty and so forth, well, we already know these people are guilty. Okay, that's been determined. But what are the underlying factors with the punishment? Okay, or was the trial conducted correctly, the sentencing phase, and so forth. Okay, so they're looking at not the facts of the case, but the constitutional issues. Okay, then you get to the oral arguments, and guys, for an attorney, this is like reaching, like a baseball player, playing in the World Series. Or a football player playing in the Super Bowl, or going to the Olympics. For an attorney, this is the Olympics. Okay? Very few attorneys ever get to argue a case in front of the Supreme Court. And guys, it is intimidating. Okay? There's no cameras allowed in the courtroom. There's no recording devices, although sometimes they have started to allow some recordings. What they're trying to protect the Supreme Court from is the politicization of the Supreme Court. I know I butchered that. Okay, but you were able to decipher what my word was.
Yes.
One more time.
Politicization. Politicization.
Politicization.
Say-
Politicization.
That was good.
To make political.
You guys, we live today. Our news comes in sound bites. Okay? And sound bites are shallow. Sound bites don't have context, do they? So if you allow cameras in the courtroom or recording devices in the courtroom, you're going to get just these sound bites that media organizations are going to take out of context and politicize the Supreme Court. And they're trying to stay above that, if you understand. Okay? So, guys, there's no witnesses. The lawyers show up. You got two podiums. Okay? You stand there with the podium. Okay? And you're going to answer questions from the judges. Now, you may bring an opening statement. Okay? There's going to be a red light, and a green light on the podium. Okay? And the judges are kind of up high like this, and they're all wearing these black robes. Okay? It's a very serious situation. Okay? So you come in there, and you have a prepared statement. Well, guys, they've already read your briefs. They know what all your arguments are. Okay? They want to grill you. Okay? They want to ask you questions. So the light turns green, and you say, "Thank you for allowing me to come here today, justices," and then it turns red. You stop talking. A justice will ask you a question. It turns green. You start to talk, and then it goes red because another justice just cut you off because he wants clarification. Okay.
That's terrible. Let's watch a video on that.
There's no camera.
No example videos.
No, Jim.
We can reenact right now.
Okay.
How long do these usually take?
As long as the justices have
Are they
questions.
still working for the gay
Now,
marriage?
huh?
How many
Are they
justices
still working
is
for the
that?
gay marriage wedding cake from?
Yeah, they're working on that right now. The gay marriage wedding cake. That's going to come out this summer. We're going to find out. Okay. Huge deal. Huge deal. Okay, so if you are a baker and a gay couple comes in and says, "Will you make a wedding cake for our gay wedding?" Okay.
Absolutely.
And you're like,
Yeah,
you know,
that's meringue.
I don't really feel comfortable partaking in that ceremony, or a wedding photographer, or a wedding
Planner.
videographer, baker. Yeah.
Okay.
All three of these cases have taken place. See, states have laws. States pass laws that protect gay, transgender, and so forth.
You butchered that.
Yeah. So LBGTQ.
GTQP goes on and on.
I think they just call it LGBT plus now.
Thank you. Because it changes weekly. Yes.
Yeah, seriously.
Okay, so how many? Do all 9 justices sit in, or just a few?
Yeah. All 9 are generally there.
Okay.
Now, they do have transcripts of this. So the Supreme Court will release the transcripts of the oral arguments. So the media and, political, people paying attention can read the questions and try and figure out how these justices are going to vote based on the questions they're asking the lawyers, right? Okay, but sometimes that doesn't really hold true, okay? Maybe they're just reaffirming their opinion or just trying to figure out how the lawyer would defend a question there, okay? So there's a limited amount of time to answer the question. No statements. They don't want your statements. They want your answers, okay? This can go on as long as they have questions, okay? So then after oral arguments, the Supreme Court is going to have a conference. They're going to sit in there on Thursdays and Fridays every 2 weeks to meet in secret to discuss the cases. They get to talk in order of seniority, okay? All the judges summarize their opinion and how they plan to vote. Then they debate for as long as necessary until all are set in their vote.
By seniority, do you mean age, or
How long they've been on the court, okay?
So even though that guy would.
The Chief Justice does get to go first.
Wow.
Yes.
That sucks.
Well, it is.
Well,
I mean,
since he's a new guy.
right? Yeah, it can be upsetting to the other justices. It's really interesting though, because occasionally these justices will do interviews, okay? And it was quite interesting. Justice Scalia, who was very conservative, was good friends with Justice Ginsburg, who's very liberal. They were good friends. Okay? I know it is. I mean, it's kind of cool to see that relationship that happens between. Now, I am sure there's probably animosity on the court, and throughout American history there has been. Okay, but these are colleagues, and they're all in the same boat together, and it's better just to kind of get along.
How do you think about the whole Scalia was murdered by Hillary conspiracy theory?
Never heard it. So I don't believe it.
How much do they get paid?
You are?
No, my mother is.
Your mother?
Yes.
She's gonna watch this and watch me.
I never. I mean, I'm. You know.
Not directly murdered by Hillary.
Right. Yeah.
But like Hillary
Now, the kid, the guy that worked for the DNC that was shot, that's some shenanigans right there.
What's the DNC?
Democratic.
DNC, Democratic National Committee. Okay, he was a staffer, and they see the DNC was hacked. Okay, and information got out from the DNC. Well, they claim it was the Russians, right? Russian hackers and this. Well, the DNC would never turn over their servers to the FBI to investigate how they were hacked. Okay. Why? Why would the DNC not let the FBI see their servers? Well, it's thought that Seth Rich downloaded stuff and gave it to WikiLeaks. Okay, and he was walking home from work one day and was shot in the back. Yeah. Sean Hannity got in some trouble because he believes that's what happened to Seth Rich. And he went on Fox News and started talking about it. He almost lost his job over it. It's pretty shady.
That's some shady stuff.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you don't want to answer this, it's fine. But what's the process to even get on the list to get picked to be in justice by the president?
No, I mean, that's a good question. Most of these people are appellate judges, circuit court judges, that will get called up to the majors. But oftentimes they'll pull people from elsewhere. Gorsuch was a federal judge. Roberts was a federal judge. I talked about Earl Warren earlier. He was the governor of California. I'm not sure if Thurgood Marshall was a federal judge before. He was an attorney, civil rights attorney. So sometimes, like there was a woman that George W. Bush put forward. She ended up withdrawing. What was her name? But she wasn't a judge, and a lot of people a lot of conservatives said no.
How was she even on the list?
Somebody that I don't know how she got on the list. But obviously, guys, you would want to have a background in constitutional law. Yes? So you could take a professor from, Harvard or Yale or somebody that taught constitutional law that had a belief system that you thought you liked and their view of the Constitution and nominate them. They do not have to even be a lawyer. They don't have to be a judge. There's no qualifications. Yeah?
So I don't know if anyone's already asked about this, but if a justice starts to suffer from dementia or loss of speech or partial paralysis, what's the procedure?
There is not an amendment or procedure to this. You could see an impeachment situation, not for a crime, but for an inability to practice.
Would they step down if it was that bad?
These people stay. I mean, I mean, what's his
Memory
name?
loss.
Rehnquist was really sick, but he didn't step down. Okay.
How much did they get paid?
$244.40. It's in your notes from yesterday.
Sorry.
It's okay. All right, so about 1/3 of the cases are unanimous. That means 9-0. So you're going to have a lot of split decisions. We get a lot of 5-4 decisions because of the makeup of the court. 4 liberals, 4 conservatives, and 1 kind of moderate. So when they make their decision, okay, this is really really important stuff here, and you do need to know this for the test, okay? You've got majority opinion, which is the most important, okay? Because what the majority opinion is doing is setting this. Precedent. I think that's what I read. Okay. Precedent. What precedent means is it's a guiding principle. From here on out, this is how we view the law and the Constitution. It's the precedent. Okay, so let me just give you a simple case. Of course, it escapes me. Well, just take Marbury v. Madison, which set the precedent for what? Judicial review, right? So from here on out, the Supreme Court has the power to look at laws and judge the constitutionality of them. That's the precedent that was set in 1803. So from here on out, they have that power. Okay? Or you take a gun decision on, remember when I talked about in Washington, D.C. versus Heller, where Heller was a homeowner. They said you're not allowed to own a handgun in the city limits. He got attacked in his home. He used his handgun that he illegally possessed in D.C., went all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said those laws banning individuals from owning handguns for self-defense are unconstitutional. So from here on out, no city can make a law banning you unless you have some other circumstances, like you're a felon, okay, from owning a gun. That's the guiding principle. That's the majority opinion. Okay, so this is who writes the majority opinion is assigned by the Chief Justice. So whoever's making the best argument in their conference over this decision, he says, you write it. You got this argument down. You've got it down. You got the law here. Yeah.
Most precedents ever be changed by future decisions?
Yeah. We talk about that. I mean, the most common one I talk about is Plessy versus Ferguson Brown, and they don't like to overturn those, right? And I'll get to that. So if the Chief Justice is on the losing side, so say it's 5-4 and the liberals win, okay, then the most senior member gets to choose who writes it. Okay? Chief Justice on the winning side, he gets to decide who writes it, and he can assign it to himself. But why is majority opinion so important? Is because from here on out, that's how the law is interpreted. It's how the Constitution is interpreted. Okay? Now, that doesn't diminish the other opinions. The other opinions are important. Okay? Especially this one. Okay? Concurring opinions, I vote with you, but for different reasons. Instead of using the 14th Amendment for your argument, I think it's a 5th Amendment issue. Okay? So I agree with the majority, but for different reasons. Okay? Now, dissenting opinion is why they feel the majority is wrong. Okay? And just that one case, Plessy versus Ferguson, 8-1. Right? You guys remember me talking about this before? Yeah. Plessy Ferguson, it was 8-1 saying separate is equal. Justice Harlan argued that the majority was wrong. that you couldn't have separate races, segregation, and so forth, and have it be equal. Okay? It wouldn't be until 1954 that the Supreme Court would change that decision. And they did so by using the dissenting opinion of Justice Harlan from 1896. Because they don't like to overturn previous court decisions. There's a term for that. Okay? It's called, what is it called?
Flip-floppy.
Yeah.
You got it.
Got it. Stare decisis. No, I didn't just make that up. Okay. Stare decisis means that one court doesn't like to overturn another court's precedents, and they try not to, because they're saying of that other court that they were wrong, they didn't understand the law, they didn't understand the Constitution, and you're throwing them under the bus, people. Okay? Even though they're all dead usually. You're spitting on their grave, okay, basically. So when they do overturn precedent, they like to use the dissenting opinion. Because that says somebody on the court was right. Somebody on that court knew what they were talking about. Okay? Does that make sense? And this summer, guys, when you're gone from my government class and gone from this institution, this is going to be in the news. It's going to be in the newspaper. When they publicize their decision on the baker. Okay? That holds huge repercussions for this country. Because if you allow states to punish people for not wanting to violate their religious freedom, this country's in trouble. So we'll see what happens. The Supreme Court got it right with the Sisters of the Little Poor and the Hobby Lobby case. The Supreme Court got it right. Okay? But really, how much control does government have over you? Okay? And this would really increase the ability of the government to punish you for trying to live out your religious freedom. All right, so hey, tomorrow or Monday we'll have a great discussion on civil liberties. I'm excited about it. We'll get into a lot of good details about what rights you do have and what rights you don't have, okay, before you graduate and go practice those rights. Peace.
Yes.